Welcome back to episode 5 of the Confluence podcast. I'm joined by Sivith and Savannah.
Hi.
Hello.
We're going to have some poetry that Savannah's written. She's going to read that to us and tell us about herself. And we'll probably have more topics. I know it's gonna flow naturally, not like how I just said it, you know. It always does. I'm always talking about like the topics we're gonna talk about, and then we just completely go off the deep end on them. It's like, well, we might talk about one thing, and then it's like, then we'll get into something deep, and it'll somehow just like turn itself around back into the original topic, and then there you go. There's 50 minutes. That's how the podcast works so far.
True.
I mean, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not. I'm part of the problem. Savannah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Savannah. I'm a second year nursing student. I'm at UNC. I'm planning to go to UNBC if everything works out next year. And I don't know what else I do. I don't know. I write poetry mostly. It really was just kind of a journaling for my mental health kind of thing, and like that kind of thing. And then I started sharing it with friends once I felt comfortable about that. And then after that, I submitted some stuff to the Confluence before we got shut down for lockdown, and I got that published in their little newsletter. And then now I'm just kind of compiling everything to submit it to McAllen Publishing, and see what comes of that. So
cool. Wow. That's exciting.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about mental health. What is your take on that?
I really like, honestly, something from nursing, because my life is nursing, that I feel really I had before, but it gave it a name, was really like a trauma-informed approach. So taking in consideration everybody's story and meeting them where they're at. I also experienced that in like social work courses that I took, where they really talk about looking at that person in their environment and really examining where they are, because it's so easy to stand on a mountain and be like, oh, you can climb up, like just do it. But it's really hard to actually like be at the bottom of that mountain and go, no, that's a really big climb. And it's really important to, even if you're on top of that mountain, to realize what it was like when you're at the bottom.
I agree.
Yeah.
I find like once you like get through it, you're just like, wow, like I don't remember a lot of it. But when I'm going through it, I'm like, this is rough. And I also feel like it's such a taboo topic too, especially when it comes to like men or like older people. I feel like our generation is the most accepting. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, especially like you said about like it always being like, you know, you can like, and I especially like see it like on Instagram and stuff, like people are always like, oh, mental health, I conquered it, top of the mountain, it was easy, you know, they just like fluff it, you know, fluff off like all the work that it took, like to, you know, like you said, like no one wants to see the starting at the bottom, no one wants to hear about that, everybody wants to hear about the success story, what came from it, you know, but it's like the grind of it. And especially like, I mean from a male point of view, like that is torture on like, you know, like if we're talking just like at the physical level, like I mean like male competition and, you know, with physiques and stuff like that, I mean it's just as prominent as with females. And I know like I've struggled with it for about the last 5 years. I've suffered with like BDD and MDD, so I had like muscle dysmorphia disease, which then just kind of, I mean the quick version of that is that you see yourself always as not good enough. It's like a body shaming type thing. And I mean, I've been struggling with that since high school. And it's one of those things where I think it really led from just being so, you know, it's just when you compare yourself to others, you really tear yourself apart, you know, and then, you know, like especially with the people that, you know, sometimes they'll, you know, I'm still someone to this day that looks in the mirror and I really don't like who I see. And even like someone who's like completely evolved from where I was 5 years ago, I don't even look the same anymore. It's still, and compliments from people like really tear me apart, which is really hard. Like I don't take like, oh, you look really good. It's just like, oh, cool, because I looked like shit before. Like it's always like I spin it, and it's just like it's something that I've always done. Like I can't really take, you know, I can take criticism, but I can't take compliments that well. Like I get, you know, I almost get defensive in the way that I can't handle that. just because I'm not really happy with where it's at. And people go through that all the time, like, body shaming is one of those mental health, if you're not comfortable with who you are. But and there's some days where I think I should be, and then there's some days where I think like I definitely shouldn't be, and just kind of ride that spectrum, both sides. So that's definitely, and males deal with it. Like how many males, have undiagnosed mental health issues because of it, right? And they don't, and it's tough. Like, like I know, like I definitely like follow a few, I guess male influencers that have been really good about mental health, but they're few and far between. They're not everywhere. And and when mental health being taboo, it's double taboo for men. We're not supposed to talk about it. We're supposed to be up here and moving along and solid, and I find in a lot of the my close friends that I've been able to kind of discover their issues, it's very well hidden, to the point where if you don't want to dig for it, you're never going to find it.
Yeah.
Which is tough, because right, like how much bottling is that taking, and how much energy resource, if you look at it like a battery, how much is that draining every day to just try to compress that and hold that all at a certain, I guess, a standstill, at an idle, so that you can continue to put on a face, I guess, which is tough. And like I work in an industry where looks really kind of set the tone for who you are. So it makes it, difficult. Like would I have ever shaved the side of my head and given myself a flat top? Not if I didn't work where I work, like you need to uphold yourself to a certain standard just to have that male presence, right? Which is tough. Like it's definitely so I think for men especially, and for myself, like I find that mental health, especially on the men's side, is so taboo that you rarely hear about it. And when you do, it's too late. Like it's almost like you hear about it because this happened, or because they committed suicide, or because you don't really hear about it until it's it's either crippling to the point where it needs professional care to come back from something like that. Or the sad part that I always think about is you never hear it. Like these men that maybe just take it to the grave with them, and they've never really expressed like kind of and emotions and feelings, and everything that's like in the male word, it's like, oh, you don't have feelings, like those are for girls. And like it's always like those kind of statements where it's like, okay, cool, like that's not true, but okay, like I guess like I'm just gonna have to get stifled by like this macho man type thing, which is I find personally, like the friends that I've been closer with on like with my male side have been the ones that have opened up to me about these issues, and a good mental health session where you're just about bawling at each other, because you've just held something in for so long. Like I find that way more beneficial than putting on a fakeness, right? That just doesn't really, like how long do you want to fake, when you're like staring at someone and you're like, okay, you're being fake to me and I'm being fake to you, what are we getting from that? Like what is that doing? So I don't know, male mental health is still, I think, in the very adolescence.
You know what I think? I think that social media plays a huge factor into it. It's because it puts like ideal pictures up or ideal videos up of what you're supposed to look like. And then you look at them and you're like, I don't look like that. Or you're like, but I'm not at that place mentally. And I feel like that plays a big factor into people's lives. Whether they're doing well, not doing well, recovering. Even when they're recovering, it'll be like, but I recovered like this in 6 weeks. And it took you 12 weeks. And then you're like, what did I do wrong? You do think that. And why aren't there stories out there about people that are down in it and actually going through it? Why do we have to talk about it once they're out and once they've recovered or they're close to recovering?
That's what I find too, is like
talked about
with those big, like when you talk about like social media and the influencers, you never hear about the grind. You never hear about, when it's like these models that are getting ready for like shoot week, you don't hear about the like the struggles in dieting and the the bulimia and stuff like that like is introduced by this. You never hear about that. You just hear about how it was my dream and then my dream is done now. And it's like, well, you missed a lot in the middle there. Which I find is, really disheartening, because like you don't really, you know in your head it's not real. but at the same time they portray it as, you know, they're just living their life and it's normal and this is how I do it. And, you know, especially in the fitness industry, right? Like, I stay at 5% body fat all year. It's like, no, you don't. I know you don't. Don't lie to me. Like, no one stays that lean all year. But then they're like, oh, it's only because I eat, you know, a lemon wedge and 10 egg whites, and that's how I do it. And it's like, no, like you're lying. You're like, there's no way. There's no way. That doesn't make sense. Like you're missing like a huge piece of that. And you know, is it the starvation? Is it, you know, is it the use of steroids? Like, is it the, you know, what is it? You know, and no one wants to talk about that, obviously, but I think that's what people want to hear about. Like, I'd much rather, you know, like someone in the industry like come out and be like, well, you know, I actually had to do all these terrible things to my body and, you know, not be natural anymore to be able to look like this. And I'd be like, okay, well, you know, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I don't, you know, don't necessarily respect the way that you did it, but at least I respect that you had the guts to tell me how you did it.
Maybe that's it. People aren't being honest about the process. So not is it only not talked about and it's incorrectly portrayed on social media, but now people aren't being honest about the process, which makes it difficult for the people that are trying to look at it and relate to it. So it makes them think that there's something wrong with them. Right? What do you think, Savannah?
Yeah, I feel like it's really also like a negative feedback loop with that, because if you don't want to talk about the process, then it makes the process more taboo, and then people feel bad about the process, and it just is this repetitive cycle of, well, now I don't want to talk about it because it's a bad thing. And that's why like I follow like some inspiration that I've gotten for my writing was from authors who talked about am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah, go for it.
Or is it?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
There we go.
I'll
set the mood.
I was like, is this a radio kind of thing?
No.
But like, yeah, no one talks about the bad shit. No one talks about like, you know, crying in the dark at night and feeling like absolute garbage. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, no, like, yeah, I cry sometimes and now I make smoothies every day and I'm doing wonderful. And it's like, no, there was a bad part there, and no one wants to talk about the bad part because it's bad, and then no one wants to, and then it's just a negative feedback loop. No one wants to talk about it, and then it just creates more taboo, and it's just a really toxic place, honestly, on social media with that kind of ideology. And that's why like for my social media, like I personally don't post anything just because I don't think there's anything interesting in my life to post. But like for the people I follow on social media, it's people who I follow like human activism and like that kind of thing, like human rights activists. And then I follow like friends and family. And then besides that, all of the influencers I follow are really people who talk about that kind of stuff. Like Neil Hilborn was one poetry author that I really followed for a long time because he talked about his struggles, and he had really struggled with OCD, and he talked about how OCD is portrayed so like romanticized almost in the media. And when you really sit down and look at it, he talked about like, oh yeah, these are like, you know, a benefit or two, but he's like, this is the horrible side of it, and this is like the worst days and how people leave you and the crummy shit about it. And he's like, and you know, that shouldn't be hidden away, that should be shared so then we can talk about it, and so then people feel less alone and feel less crummy.
Why do you think it is that it's such a taboo thing to mention that someone's taking medication for their mental health? Like, why is it that like it's okay if you go to yoga? It's okay if you go to the gym as an outlet. It's okay. It can be all right if you go to counseling because you're talking it through, but it's not okay if you take prescribed medication by the physician.
Yeah. And, you know, with medication comes counseling. Those two go hand in hand with just being so shot down. Like it's almost discredits your entire process when you start talking about it. You're like, oh, I go to, you know, like me and my father went to counseling for many years in my teenage years because we were just so cutthroat with each other that the house felt like a war zone when we were in it, and it was just terrible. And I mean, I know even some of my friends that were no longer friends, we're like, oh yeah, you go to counseling with your dad, like that's cute, like nice, like how about you guys just deal with it? And I'm like, nope, like we tried that and it didn't make it any better, but the counseling really did, and we've never been stronger since then. And because I think we finally realized that we both needed someone to kind of get in there, and and I always look at it that way. I always look at counseling as being someone from the outside that's so impartial to all this crap, and they can come in and be like, oh, okay, well, did you guys try this? And we're doing this the whole time, we don't have enough time to like kind of see like, oh no, I guess we didn't talk about that, we just argued a lot. Or instead of like having a chat about something, or like maybe like taking a breather or looking at it from a different angle, nope, we were just at each other. And it was, but counseling, as soon as you put counseling, people are like, oh, here we go, fucking nutcase, like he goes to counseling, like, oh, like it's like it just gets this weird, like people look at you like they're like, holy fuck, this guy, no, his mind's in the toilet, like he needs someone to help him along, like, yeah, weak, like, yeah. And that's the huge one. That's what I always found, like people were always like, well, that's a sign of weakness. And it's like, well, is it really a sign of weakness, or is that really a sign of strength, knowing that you have a problem and that someone else can fix that?
Or help you work through it. I think it's a sign of strength.
I think so. Like, but it took me years to kind of accept that that's what we had to do. And I mean, looking back on it, I would go back and do it all over again. If it meant, not having those stressful teenage years, right? Like, I mean, having a father and a teenage boy going through high school, like nightmare. And I know if I ever have a son or daughter, like I know like that's, if we ever run into that problem, like I will be the first one to be like, let's go to counseling. Let's have someone help us get through this, so that we don't have to spend all the time and energy, fighting and arguing, and and all that time that, like, I look back and I'm like, yeah, that was months we wasted where we couldn't get along and we couldn't agree on things, and we were always so tense with each other. And I'm like, why did we waste all that time? Like, at the end of the day, like months, those really matter. Months, weeks, and days really matter. Like when you really boil it down, right? Like, like every day on earth is a good one, but you gotta cherish the ones you had before, right? You gotta, those aren't just given to you for free. Like, like stuff can happen, right? So, if I could go back and turn 2 months into positive, right? Like I'd do it in a heartbeat. So, but yeah, no, and then you throw pharmaceutical or prescribed drugs on that, and then people are like, oh, here we go, like without your drugs, you're just like, woo! You're just like, you're losing your mind, you can't even control yourself. And it's like, well, no, that's actually not how this works. Like, it's not like you come off your meds and become a psychopath. Like that's not, it's not like that. But some people just see the meds as, oh well, at least they found a pill for her or him that, thank God it fixed him. But it's like, no, that's actually not how that works. From friends that I've had that are still on medication, they don't call it, like you take one pill and all of a sudden it's just sunshine and rainbows straight through the whole day. Like it's not like that. And I haven't personally had to have any medication for my mental health, but I mean, at what point is, drinking or doing, other illicit drugs, like how is that any different, right? To cope with something, right? Like, to take a pill that is, given to you, prescribed to you, and it helps you be able to navigate your life in a way that is positive and healing. How is that any different? Like you take that and you're like, well, that's terrible. But then if someone goes out and gets blackout drunk to forget about something or becomes an alcoholic, like you look at those and you're like, one is clearly better than the other. Clearly, like no question.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that it's more acceptable to self-medicate versus getting prescribed medication. And it's because it's a norm in our society, right? So people think it's okay, but why can't we just say that it's okay to be on medication? It's okay to stay on it forever, and it's okay to be weaned off of it. And it doesn't make anyone any better or anyone's trauma worth any less or weigh any less, right? What do you think, Savannah?
I think that really is, yeah, we should look at it differently because counseling and medication both are just we're so taboo for like so long. And I feel like now it's kind of getting better. I feel like men's mental health has a long way to go because I feel like that movement had a really late start. But I feel like in like general, from like my experience personally, like counseling's a little bit more normalized with like a younger generation, but like my parents are like, if someone's on therapy, it's like, oh God, they're on therapy, like their brain is mush. But when it's like, you know, me and my friends will like sit at the table and be like, yo, my therapist. And it's normalized, and that's great. And with medication, like I know personally, like me, when I was like 16, I was on antidepressants for a while, and it worked for a bit. Well, first with antidepressants, you usually have a low before you get a high. So you get like to your worst place, and then it picks up, and then you're like, okay, now they're finally working. And it wasn't like, so many people see that as like a crutch, and they're like, oh man, like you needed meds, that's horrible. And I'm like, no, it was just something to try and help. And I'm like, it's not anything shameful. And that's why I talk about it, because I'm like, you know what, it's life. And with that, like my parents were so consumed with people's opinions and ideas of like, oh God, like my kid's on meds and my kid's in therapy and blah blah blah. And because of this, they took me off of it like really early, like basically I started showing progress, and then they're like, okay, we're done. And that's really not what I needed at that point. And especially being on medication and then being like, okay, cold turkey, we're done. It really wasn't great. It put me in a worse place, and it just altogether was really bad. And we really should look at it as, it's okay to be on medication. It's okay to get off medication. Like, honestly, whatever helps you navigate through life helps you navigate. And we shouldn't be bottling up and throwing it in the closet and ignoring it. We should be opening that bottle up and, you know, talking about what's inside that bottle, and getting help for that, because bad stuff happens, and it's okay to talk about it. And like going back to like people who struggle with like trauma and stuff, and for so long people will just bottle that up and be like, oh no, it's fine. And also just like comparing traumas and being like, oh well, like how we talked about comparing recoveries.
Yeah.
And people look at it and be like, oh yeah, like, you know, I struggled with like my mental health or whatever, oh but I don't have it as bad as them, so I'm okay and I don't need to talk about it. When it's like, no, everybody should talk about it. And there's no measurement of trauma, there's no pain scale for how bad I hurt. It's just like, no, everybody struggles differently, everybody has a different map through life, and we should all just respect that.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that social media has like a threshold too, where they care. It's like okay, you're talking about it, we care. All of a sudden it hits a point where it's like, okay, it's clickbait. You know, now you're just doing it for attention, right? There's like this fine line where it's like they accept it, and you're like, you know, people are like, oh, okay, now we're talking about a journey, and then all of a sudden they just stop, and they're like, okay, well, this is just a cry for help now. Like now you're just pleading out, you know, to the broken hearts out there, and you're trying to, you know, what is it, build a fan base, build a subscriber base? Like, is that what you're trying to do? And I find like that's really hard to, where I find like any influencer that I follow, I usually end up unfollowing, because throughout their time they start to really show their true colors when it comes to whatever they're dealing with. You know, it starts to come out at first it was genuine, and now it's this, and now it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, is someone using, performance enhancing drugs, but they don't actually discuss if they are or if someone else is, but it's just there to just intrigue people to watch it, to see, who it is, right? And then on the flip side of that, you have people that watch that are just like, oh, I want to know so much about how wrong this is, and they almost in a weird way like get off to watching this, like watching people's like mental health, just to like figure out what is wrong with them, and which I think is sick in a way. Like, it's just like, that is just not healthy in any way, shape, or form, to want to watch someone like discuss their process just so you can pick it apart. Like,
it's unfair.
What do you think, Sivith?
I think that it's really unfair. Like, personally, I have overcome a lot of things. I go to weekly counseling. I haven't needed to take any medication, although a lot of people close to me have and are still on it. And they don't share it. It's not something they talk about, which is interesting because a lot of them are actually healthcare providers and they don't talk about it because there is still a lot of stigma around it. And I find that interesting. I'm really blessed, like my dad, Brent, he's really open to talking with me about mental health. So I have him as like a family member that I can lean on. And my friends are so good about it. Um, I'd say like my depression comes and goes in waves. I'm not open about it. I don't really talk about it ever because I wait for it to pass. But I also deal with anxiety and I talk about that more openly. I also didn't even realize I had anxiety until I came to nursing school. So not to laugh about it, but maybe that's what induced it more, the stress. I talk about that more openly, I think, because I'm around a lot more healthcare workers. They're topics we do talk about. But the sad thing is, like, I also know nurses in our program that don't, like nursing students that don't believe in mental health. Yeah.
Oh.
So
Oh,
not
that's
everyone,
nice.
yeah, but it's real. And those people could potentially work with people that have gone through trauma and see it as an excuse. So I think it is really important to self-advocate for yourself too, which is why we do turn to family and friends and make it more normalized so we can learn how to self-advocate for ourselves. Because you may need to advocate for yourself in a place like a hospital. You know, it's not something we think about, but it's a possibility, or out in public. What's your guys' opinion on people self-advocating about their mental health? So it's not something that you really hear about or talk about.
I think self-advocation is like one of the things that is really good to do in like I think everyone should be a self-advocate for their mental health, at least in their own private sphere, even if they don't need to do it in a public sphere. Like self-advocating for yourself, going, no, this is okay, this is normal, just telling yourself that, and approaching those kinds of biases that may have been brought up from social media or family background or whatever, and tackling that yourself is a really big part of it. And I think it's something that honestly is kind of sad that it's necessary to be a self-advocate in a public sphere,
Yeah.
because I know so many people who've struggled with like mental health and like substance abuse. Especially substance abuse and mental health really go hand in hand with just stigma. And coming into I know healthcare providers and nursing students and stuff who just see that kind of thing as, oh well, you're weak, it's a crutch, like you could get better if you wanted to, and that kind of thing. And it's disheartening. And like that person is in their most vulnerable place and in the worst place that they could be in their life, and you're going to kick them while they're down. Like it's just, and some people can't self advocate, and that's why I think as healthcare providers it's really important that we, one of our standards of practice as nursing is like advocation for your patient. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important and something that should be brought in for healthcare workers in general, just advocating for those vulnerable people and those vulnerable populations, because not everybody can self advocate, and it's sad that we require that.
Mm-hmm. How do you think someone gets to the place where they learn to self-advocate for themselves? Because that's really hard to do in a daily situation, let alone with your mental health. Like you obviously have to go through steps to get there. I think personally for me, it's was building up my self-esteem, working on myself on the inside and the outside. And that's how I am able to get there. Am I there 100%? No. Will I ever be there 100%? I don't know. But I have come like a long way. And those are the steps I took to get there. So I wonder like what other steps people would need to take or like learn about to get there. What do you guys think? And not everyone needs to get there. That being said, like you don't need to get to a place where you feel like you have to self-advocate, because sometimes you just don't, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I feel like definitely kind of like in the line of work that I do, like I deal with a majority of men that deal with issues of self-advocating mental health and definitely substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And in that I see it every day, you know, horrifically. I see it every day, like how the really the system and the world and kind of, you know, social media and all those other outlets have created a society that that almost they leave the weak behind, and they
Mhm.
just they store them in a place where, you know, they're not going to hurt anyone, and this is, you know, and but then once they're there, there's no real, they don't really push the part of self, you know, advocating for their mental health and their substance, you know, if they have substance abuse issues, and let alone, like, you have FASD, you have all these, you know, these
Yeah.
other things, like, forget about the substance for a second, push those out of the way, there's still a lot more things that can be at play there, and a mixture of all of them, really. So, and, you know, I find that, you know, as a male that's gone through, and it, like I said, like Sivith, you said it perfectly, like, are we ever going to be at 100%? Who knows, but
Yeah.
we're moving towards that. You know, we're
Mhm.
trying to keep the wheels moving forward. And,
Yeah.
you know, as someone who can attest to every day trying to move forward and just try to be the best self you can for, you know, myself and for others, like, I really see that self, you know, showing someone that you can that how to self advocate, and what it does, and how it's bettered you, and even in the most microscopic way, you know, even in the way that, you know, I felt like getting up this morning and I didn't feel like going back to bed because I was so scared to leave the house.
And
Or
that's huge.
that's massive, and it's, you know,
Yes.
one of those things where, like, I speak with men every day that, you know, they've never had a male presence that hasn't either beat them or abused them, and it's, you know, for them that they're scared of a presence like that. But then if I'm able to bring, you know, something new to the table, right, and talk about, like, well, let's talk about this if you want, you know, and bring up, be that outlet, you know, to feel like the self advocation part of it is now, like, hey, I can hold half of that, you know, take my
Mhm.
hand, we can move forward together, because I know it's hard, you know. And
Mhm.
I find that, you know, sometimes with, like you said, you have some healthcare providers that just don't have either that belief or that skill set, or that want to have that skill set,
Mhm.
to because in no way, you know, like, disclaimer here, in no way am I a mental health expert, and will I ever be? Absolutely not. But, you know, have I dealt with my own? Sure. Am I an expert in my own field? Sure. You know, in a way that, you know, like, I'm working on it. You know, is it perfect? No, but if I can help someone, you know, just, you know, have the courage to even just, you know, talk to, you know, open up the conversation, right? And once again, Sivit, like you said, the conversation on mental health, it just has to start with two people,
Yeah.
you know, and it, you know, and it even has to start, like, you know, within yourself. Like, you know, you're not ready to heal if you're not ready to you know, to dive into it. And I mean, I think a
Mhm.
lot of people bottle that up because they're just not ready to talk about it. And it might not be that they're not ready to talk about it right away, but maybe it's not the right person, maybe it's not the right time, maybe it's not the right atmosphere. And especially,
Yeah.
you know, in my line of work, I mean, you know, these guys are only out, you know, so many hours of a day, and, you know, they deal with, you know, their families on the outside, and it's, you know, it's something that, you know, sometimes doesn't always lead to the perfect, you know, the wanting to talk about issues, you know, or even wanting to advocate for help, you know. And I think that's, like you said, the advocating is one of the hardest parts to get the ball rolling.
You know, like on that note, like if you could give a younger person advice, or like even to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self, or a young male?
Hmm. Savannah, do you have anything for a young girl? You gotta let me think about this.
Okay, I'll go first.
Oh, okay, so
Okay.
go for it.
Thought about it as you were talking, so I was like, this is a good question.
All right, all right. I'll think about it.
If I could look back and tell 16-year-old Sifit something, I would say Siffy, because that's what I call myself all the time. I'd be like, Siffy, you are gonna be the person you dream of being. You're gonna move mountains. You're gonna run in elections. You're gonna be a bomb ass nurse, because I love working in the hospital. You're gonna have your dream body and be into fitness. You're so gay. Stop trying to be straight. And you're gonna be the person you dreamt of being. Sometimes I look in the mirror and it scares me because I see myself, and it worked so hard to get here that it's so scary to see yourself, and you're like, damn, that's me. And I'm at that place in my life, and I wish I knew that when I was younger. I wish someone would have told me that, hey, you're going to be that person. So I would go back and tell that little girl that. Keep plugging away. Yeah. What about you? Any of you guys can go next.
For me, I would probably, oh, my internet connection is unstable, so sorry if I lose you. But basically, I would probably just go back and tell my younger self, like probably like 16 me or something, and just say like, you're gonna get through it, and you're enough, and you don't have to let other people define what you are, because that was something that I know I really struggled with, was just being like, I need to fit in the box and not fitting in the box, and then going, oh no, I'm outside the box, what do I do? And not really finding that path, and just kind of having to figure that out. And just the reassurance of being like, you will figure it out, don't worry, would be like so nice. Because we always know, and it sucks. And it's just yeah, and it's a struggle, and it's something that like I, as a younger person, would have loved to know, that just I'm enough and I don't need to be any more than I am.
I love that. That's so sweet. Okay, your turn.
Okay, I think if I was gonna talk to 16-year-old Zach, I'd probably say that enjoy the little moments and stop, and I don't know if stop's a harsh word, but stop blaming yourself for things you can't control. That's a big one, and I think that still to this day still resonates with me. It's like, focus on what you can do and what you can achieve, and with the things outside of your control, don't try not to stew on them. There's nothing you can do, and the energy that you spend trying to stop the entire world from spinning is the energy that you could have put towards yourself, and just the wanting to move forward, and just feel that even the little victories are huge. And I think, like, as a young teenager, I overlooked the little things, and now when I look back and people are like, oh wow, like, look how far you've come. Like, it's like, I don't remember all those little things. I don't remember them. I repress them. They're deep down. They're not coming back up ever again. Like, they're going to the grave, and it's like one of those things where it's tough, right? Because you're not, by not enjoying even the little victories, you don't motivate, or you don't advocate for yourself that you have what it takes. And even at the, because I found that's what was the problem. Like, when I was growing up, I always had these massive goals, and it was always goals that either were not necessarily, like, I had a timeline that didn't fit the goal.
Yeah.
And then when it didn't work, I blamed it on something else, or I blamed it that it was either someone's fault, something's fault, or my fault. There was three categories it could go into, and sadly enough, it went into my fault a lot of the times, which then ended up, you go down into that dip where you're like, oh, this is my fault, and then you really beat yourself down to almost, teach yourself a lesson to not do that again. So in a way, you just end up self-harming your mental health over and over and over again, until you're at the point where you're not really sure where up is. You're just like, well, I've beaten myself down, but you hide it behind a face, like, it's just like, oh yeah, like, I'm funny and laugh, and but on the inside it's like, well, I'm actually, my battery's at 0 today. Like, I don't have anything left. I'm just floating along, really. And I feel like that's something that I still have, and I think will always be with me, that I put on a, not a persona, but I put on like an attitude, like, I just, like, the way I carry myself is always true, but sometimes what's underneath isn't, which is tough, which is, there's some days where I just, like, people are like, wow, you're like on fire today, but like inside I'm like, well, I'm dead. Like, I'm dead on the inside. Like, it's like, this is, but once again, back to, males, right? We're not supposed to show weakness. We're not, we're supposed to always be up here, and it's always, go, 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 and no stop, and testosterone and the male, like it's just, it goes back to like caveman times, right? Where it was like males were always like
Yeah.
the powerhouse and the caregiver and the bringer and the provider, and it was just like, and it's, I still feel that like that Neanderthal type mentality is still set around men. Men are the one that are supposed to go to work and they provide and put the bacon, the bread on the table, and even though like now there's there's not that, but it still feels like it, right? Like men still still need to, they have this perception that they need to be a certain way, look a certain way, act a certain way, provide a certain way. Like I'm still in that, where it's just like I want to make more than than like, I want to provide more for my family than like my wife, for instance. Like this sick mentality that I just want, I'm the provider, but it's not like that anymore. And it's tough because they still portray that, right? The alpha male is always portrayed in everything, like movies, art. No one gets a tattoo of like a turtle when you could get a tattoo of a wolf, right? Like it's like, well, one of those is definitely like a male, like a big wolf head. It's like, oh, cool, because that's tough, that's alpha, that's you don't want a bumblebee. Like if you had to choose between both, like obviously like males always kind of did, and not all males, but like it's definitely, I feel like it's leaching into almost everything that's either with mental health, it's like, wow, well, men don't need that, or and social media, it's like, well, men don't talk about this, and it's always like this very stern, cutthroat, there's no gray area in there. There's not like, well, actually some do, like, nope, that's it. So I just, yeah, I guess if I could go back and talk to my 16-year-old self, it would be that, take, enjoy the little things that come in the little goals, because that's really, what's gonna fuel you to want to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Wow, this got deep.
This is a deep episode.
I know. All right, so we had to take a break because Savannah's power went out. We were able to get her back on her phone. Is it dark there? It's kind of dark. There's no lights on. Cool.
Yeah, no, it's like the light of my laptop running off battery.
Perfect. Yeah, so we were talking about oh yeah, one physical characteristic and one non-physical characteristic that we love about ourselves. And you can obviously do more than one if you want to talk about it. Who wants to go first?
So a physical characteristic would probably be, my calves are very nice, as well as I like the shape of my eyes. I think they're really nice. A emotional personality characteristic, non-physical, would probably be like my humor, because when I was younger I was told I was unfunny, but then once I got older people were like, you're so funny, you're the funny friend. I'm like, thanks, it's the trauma. But so but like, yeah, I definitely feel like I get to make people laugh, and I enjoy seeing people smile. So
I like that. Okay, your turn.
All right. I would say my favorite physical characteristic would be my chest. So that is probably, I just have a great big chest and a massive rib cage. So
I like that.
yeah, it's kind of a weird one, but it's always been like all the men in our family have one. So we all carry the same genetics there. So it's like you can tell us all apart because we're much wider than a normal human being. So, which is always fun. And I guess personality is that I'm really empathetic and calm. And those two combined together is what I think is it. Because like, I know a lot of people that are like, that like they're like, oh yeah, like I'm, empathy and all that. But then it's like their empathy, but their level's too high, like the energy, and then you can't really get there because it's just like you're coming on way too strong. And I find like I have that ability to be, empathetic to someone, but also be really calm and approachable. All right, Sivith, you're up.
Okay. For physical, I love my eyebrows and my smile. And for personality, I would say how extroverted I am because I find that it makes it easier for me to just fit into places, and allows me to try new things without being shy. And it like helps me push myself out of my comfort zone. Yeah. And it allows me to meet wicked people and make great friends. I have a lot of friends. And yeah, that's about it. It's kind of awkward talking about the things that you like about yourself and then knowing that people are going to listen to it.
I know. I like
Why is
thought
it that it's hard?
I thought about it after I said it. I was like, oh fuck, I'm gonna hate listening to this 3 more times when I edit this video. I'm gonna be like, idiot. What were you thinking? I'm gonna. It's just gonna be. I'm just gonna fast forward through this part. I'm like, nope, this is where I said something dumb. Move on.
I wasn't really thinking about it when I asked, and I was really enjoying it when you guys were talking. And then the moment I started talking, I was like,
You're like,
I don't know if I wanted to ask this question.
I mean, this is a good segue to how mental health really is. It's a weird conversation.
It is, but why is it that it's easier to talk about things that are messed up, or like, that's the wrong word. We're gonna cut that out. Okay. But on that note, why is it easier to talk about things that aren't okay, but it's hard to talk about things that are okay? Like, what do you think that stems from? Like, why is it so hard for me to talk about the things that I love about myself on camera? Yet I could easily talk about like the anxiety I've been going through, or like the things I would want to tell my younger self that was struggling.
I think probably like a large part of it comes from like the like culture of like trying to be humble and not being like egotistical or narcissistic or full of yourself. And it's kind of like, that's good. You shouldn't be narcissistic, but you also should love yourself, and you should give yourself credit where credit is due. If you're like, man, someone did that so great, I'm going to commend them, then why wouldn't you commend yourself?
Yeah. I actually kind of like the way you put it.
And I feel like it's like a balancing act too, because as you become more humble, people want to see more of your faults.
Oh my gosh, I have a random rant to go on. Okay.
You're welcome. You're welcome, internet. I did it. Woo!
Wait, no, I just got to put this in the universe because this is so annoying and this really bothers me. I would say, like, on a scale of like 0 to 10, 10 being that I'm the most confident you could possibly be, I'm a solid 8.5 to 9. And I find that people often want to hear what's wrong in my life or what's going wrong. And it really bothers me because I'm a closed off person. Yeah. And like, I don't really like to talk about my struggles. Like, it's not something I just randomly start talking about in a conversation, or things that I don't like about my body. But I feel like there's a lot of the time, like, where people will be waiting for me to talk about it so that they can relate to me, or so that they can see, like, she's not always like this. And it really bothers me, especially in a group setting. And now I'm done my random rant.
No, I feel that. Like today, I said to one of my coworkers, I'm like, they're like, oh, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm living the fucking dream. And he says, and he turns to me and he goes, that's white person for I want to kill myself, right? And I was like, nope. I was just saying that a little bit sarcastically. Didn't mean, that wasn't, nope, that wasn't what I meant. I was like, well, that's dark. I'm like, no, I'm actually not wanting to kill myself. So it's
You actually want to go home.
We're on the way up here. We're on the way up. I was like, he said that, and I like stopped in my tracks. I was like, holy fuck, that's deep. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, that's white person for I want to kill myself. I'm like, you can't
Why
say
couldn't
that.
you just accept it?
Yeah, I'm like, you can't say shit like that. I was like, oh my god. I just like walked away and I was just like shook. I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm never saying that around him again. I'm like, oh my god. It was a joke. Relax. It was a joke.
I shouldn't even be laughing, but I don't know why it's funny.
I know. Like I like laughed about it when I was like walking through the hallway, and I'm like, that is so sick. I was like, what the fuck? When it's just like so bad that you can't, the mechanism is to laugh.
Yeah, because you don't know how to react.
It's so messed up. You just laugh hysterically. You're like, ah, just try to deal with it. It's like, fuck.
Yep. All right, ready to listen to some poetry?
So ready.
All right. Let me just adjust this so I can see my screen. I picked one that's so like some of my stuff, if I put it more of it out of there, a lot of it is very hard to find online. But a lot of it is a little bit more dreary. I picked one that's a little bit more upbeat because I wanted a good vibe to be in this. So good vibes. So this one's called You Are Love. This is for the ones who cry at night, with warm, salted tears streaming down their tender cheeks, alone. Caged in the darkness, consuming the room as the night progresses, using every ounce of their force and their pillow to muffle their cries, as not to waken others with their silence burden-filled wails. You are more inspiring and beautiful and breathtaking than any flower, butterfly, or sunset on this earth, because you have overcome adversity. Whether others see your adversity as a single raindrop is irrelevant, because you are that because for you that adversity felt like a tidal wave sweeping over you in an oceanic storm. You were drowning but managed to swim. You may have taken some water in with you, but you are still living, and that is inspiring. You are powerful and strong and astute because of your fight with yourself. The bravery shown by you is astonishing. You are able to accomplish any goal because you are absolutely remarkable. You are loved, maybe not by those you see in front of you, but by those who may not truly be there. Others care for you, love you, and want you to succeed. Even in those times of utter despair and loneliness, we are here. You may not view your battle as something to behold, but it is. Fighting yourself is one of the hardest combats you will ever endure, because only you know all of your vulnerabilities, and you are valid. I was once like you, but you will win this fight, I promise. Please hold on for us here who love you. And basically it was just kind of a good vibe of like, people go through a lot of struggle, and some people may play down that struggle and be like, oh, well, I struggled even more, but that's not cool. And you should be proud of what you've gone through, because even if it's not something that you're like, oh, hey, this is a traditional struggle that I've like overcome, like a rags to riches story, it might just be like, hey, I got out of bed today, or I made myself food, or I put away half a basket of laundry. And that's something, and you should be proud of that, because others struggle and you struggle, and only you know how good or bad things can get, and only you can help yourself make progress towards it.
I loved it. I
Yeah,
felt like you
that
were
was
talking
incredible.
directly at me. Like, I don't know what it was, but it felt like when you're talking, you're like having a conversation with me, and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
the tidal wave in an oceanic storm. Like, whoa.
I know.
I was like, holy shit, that hits.
Yeah.
And the you are valid. Oh my God, do I love that.
I love that so much too. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Yeah, with a lot of this, I really try to like basically speak to the audience, and like this is one that I wrote more when I had overcome a lot of the hard times with like depression and that kind of thing. But I have some that are like things that were really when I was still in it, and it was like, oh, that is a dark thing. But I like to still put that out there, because like we talked about, it's important to share that grind, and it's important to share the bad moments. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes.
Thanks.
That was
Thanks for letting me share.
I think we definitely have to get like a poetry slam night going.
I know.
Dude,
we got a heavy hitter. We got a heavy hitter on the show here. That's it. Big guns are out. All right. Thank you for joining us on the episode 5 of the Confluence podcast. I was joined by Sivith and Savannah. Savannah read her beautiful poem, and it was a real deep episode. And as always, if you want to see your work featured on the show, feel free to send it to editor@cncsu.ca. And if you see it on the show, a $20 check is coming your way. All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Make sure to click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. And make sure to check out the links in the description for everything Confluence.